All right, welcome everyone. We are talking about open educational resources and going back to basics. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about our OER Conversion Grant at CRC, and then I'm going to go into LibreTexts and some of the tools that are available there. If you are interested in applying for the conversion grant, you might be remixing a textbook, and I kind of wanted to do something that showed you how to navigate that system a little bit, because there are just a ton of resources on LibreText, and I think sometimes people just don't understand how exactly to find it. And then also, once we wrap up with that, if there's time left over, and there are folks who, I know there are a couple people on the call already that have applied for the OER Conversion Grant, and you haven't done your first check-in yet. So if we have time, we can do that part of it as well, so that this can count for that first check-in as well. So I'm hoping we'll have time to do that. I didn't introduce myself. I'm so sorry. My name is Andy Atkins Pogue. I am a librarian here at CRC, but I have been on leave from the library for the last several years working on this project to become a zero textbook cost college. Before we start, I want to kind of know who's in the room. So if y'all can do this little interactive quiz for me, I'm gonna make the QR code bigger. And that'll help me too as we're looking at resources. Okay, I think that's all of you. Thank you.
Andy?
Yes.
How does it decide, the colors? Because I noticed that some, like, it's one thing if they were all different colors, but some of them were the same. I think the first three were blue, and then the last three were these different colors.
I have no idea, Greg.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you can, on this tool, which is just an add-on to Google Slides, an external tool, I think you can customize it too for your color scheme, which I did not take the time to learn how to do.
Thank you.
All right. A little background. Back in 2021, President Bush decided that we should become a zero textbook cost college. And at the time, we started using HERF money that was related to federal money that we were getting for COVID relief for our students. And we've been working on that since 2021. So what we have estimated is that we save our students about $2 million in textbook costs each semester for our zero textbook cost sections. And since fall of 2021, that has equated to about $12 million in savings. So huge amount of money that is being saved by our students. So not only is it breaking down the financial barrier, but also I've had meetings recently with administrators from other colleges, because we're supporting some other colleges and trying to do this work as well. And one comment that has stuck with me is I had an administrator at another college say, I don't agree that this is an equity issue. And my argument is that not only is it a financial equity issue, but also the fact that your students have access to the material on the very first day of class, that is an equity issue. And we have done research with our actual students that have told us that they are making enrollment decisions based on the cost of the textbook. Some students are enrolling in classes without knowing they can't really afford the textbook and are trying to get by without it and then end up not doing well. And some students are not even enrolling in the course. And that particularly impacts our STEM courses, where we know that already we don't have enough diversity in the STEM field. And I think this is me making that connection, that when students can't afford the materials for those classes, they are staying away from them. So I absolutely think it is an equity issue, and that's why I'm very passionate about this work. When we started in fall of 2021, about 10% of our sections were zero textbook costs. In the fall of this past year, this past semester, we had more than 1,000 sections that were zero textbook costs. And not all of our ZTC sections are using open educational resources. OER is really the most sustainable way to do this because the material is free not only for faculty, but for students. And you can make changes to OER, and I'll talk about that next. But in some cases, especially in career and technical education, there are not a lot of OER resources. I'm going to use automotive as an example. They use one textbook for, I want to say 16 or 18 of their courses. It's a massive textbook that covers all kinds of different topics. And they would love to write their own textbook, cover all of that material, but folks in that department simply haven't had the time or the bandwidth to do that, and there's not an adequate open educational resource to cover all of the topics that are included in that textbook. So for that particular book, the college purchased copies of that. I'm going to call it a seminal textbook because it covers many of their classes, and we digitized it and we offer it as a digital loan to students, so that they can take those classes as a zero textbook cost class and still have access to the textbook. And I think that department, I'm working with them, and in the future, I think they are going to move towards OER, but they just need some time to write it and think about it and work on it. So some of our zero textbook cost sections are not using open educational resources. I'm going to go through a couple definitions. So open educational resource means that it is openly licensed. So it is free for faculty and students to not only use, but under certain Creative Commons licenses, most of them, there's only a couple that you can't make any changes. So most of those licenses allow you to change things, to add things, to delete things. And you can also create something new, which is called a remix or an adaptation, where you are pulling things from multiple sources to create something new. And that might be helpful in a discipline like economics, where you have your economic theory, but then you need to pull in some equations. So you might be pulling something in from a math textbook. That might be true for physics as well. In geography, you might be pulling something in from a geography textbook, but maybe also something from a history textbook or a humanities textbook talking about human geography or cultural geography. So you can create something by using lots of different resources. And sometimes I will get the argument that you're infringing on my academic freedom by asking me to use this OER. I want to use this commercial textbook. And yes, our faculty have the rights and the ability to choose whatever they want to meet the learning outcomes in their courses. but I believe it actually fosters academic freedom because it allows you, every faculty I've heard from that says that I want to use this commercial text because it's really great, then usually within 2 sentences they say, but there are issues with it. I found mistakes. I wish the examples were more relevant to our students. And with OER, you can make those changes. The other term that you may have heard during some events that we've had is open pedagogy. So open pedagogy is the idea that students become active learners and contributors to the knowledge base. And the kind of the easiest way to wrap your head around this is to think about, you might hear the term a disposable assignment as opposed to a renewable assignment. And a disposable assignment would, a traditional essay would be an example. So a research essay where you give your students a prompt, they're asked to do some research, they do some research, they work very hard on researching and writing and changing, and there might be a peer review process, but maybe not. Then they turn that paper in, the instructor is the only person who sees it, they read it, they provide feedback, it goes back to the student, and then it's done. And for students, that might be, gosh, I worked so hard on this and nobody's ever going to see it. The idea behind a renewable assignment is that your students are creating something that is contributing to the knowledge base that is shared more widely. So it might just be shared within the course, or it might be shared more openly through an open educational resource. And Greg is a great example for this. He's in our session today. He teaches history, and he has actually done an assignment in his course where he's had students, he's using an open educational resource textbook, but he's asked his students to contribute primary source material and to help rewrite that textbook so that they can bring in some of their lived experience, some of their history, and rework the textbook. And now that textbook is going to be used in future semesters, so future students will see that work that his previous students have done. And it can be a continual process. Another really great example, which Heather, who's in the session, is doing this semester, is doing a Wikipedia assignment. So there's actually a wiki education where you can you sign up for a course, there's lots of material that's available to you, and you can incorporate that into your class where students are actively editing Wikipedia pages and contributing to something that people around the world may see. And through this process, you're also making sure that you're getting permission from your students to publish their information, and there's kind of processes related to that. And I have a link to a guide that has more information on that. So both of these ideas are culturally responsive. They're learner-driven rather than teacher-driven. And I think we all agree that that is a more meaningful process for students to actually learn material instead of just regurgitating things that they have read in a textbook. Our OER Conversion Grant, there are 4 possible categories that faculty can apply in, and you can apply in multiple categories for the same course. So category 1 is for faculty who have been using a commercial textbook, but they're ready to switch to an open educational resource. That's category 1. Category 2 are for faculty who have been using an open educational resource, but maybe it's not quite perfect and they would like to make some changes. So they're going to remix it. And that might include, like I said before, deleting material, adding material, writing some material yourself, or actively having your students help you create material. Category 3 is curating and or creating open ancillaries and assessments. And so this is where the multiple category might come in. So you might apply in category 2 and say, I'm going to remix this OER textbook But also during that process, I'm willing to share with other faculty the assignments that I use that are connected to this textbook so that they might also be able to use them, adapt them as they see fit, and move them forward. And that can be really cross-disciplinary. So just because an assignment was created for a history class, that might also be really applicable in other disciplines as well. And then the last category is publishing in-house material as an open educational resource. So this might apply if you're in the sciences and you're kind of using a lab manual that you've helped create or you created within the department. The idea behind this is that you're publishing it more widely so that other faculty across the district or the state could potentially use and adapt that material. It also might be a situation where you've created a lot of material in Canvas. So sometimes faculty say, I don't actually use a textbook. I've written all of this material and it is in Canvas. And as long as we know how to attribute everything, we can then publish that in as an open educational resource so that others might also be able to use that material as well. The milestones and deliverables for the OER Conversion Grant, you've got to fill out the application. You have to come to office hours or do a check-in with myself, or I have a colleague who's helping me with this. Her name is Sarah Davis. She hosts office hours every week. You have to enroll in the Teaching with OER and Open Pedagogy course, which is a self-paced Canvas course. In that course, there are 6 modules. In the first 5 modules, there are 2 assignments. One is a very quick kind of self-check knowledge, check your knowledge quiz that's auto-graded. And then the second assignment is a reflection, telling us what was most meaningful out of the module, and also incorporating open pedagogy, where we ask you to write a quiz question and then decide whether you're going to give us permission to add that question into the quiz. And then the final act is to turn in your final assignment, and it is different depending on which category that you've applied. So if you are applying for multiple categories, that last final assignment number 6, you'll just turn it in twice, once for category 2 and once for category 3. And then after that final assignment, it's not technically graded. I just have to look at it because I often have questions. Then you'll do another check-in with me. We'll make sure everything is ready to go. And then your name gets pushed forward for payment. So the payment for this, I can't remember if I had that on here, is $2,500 per course per category. And the other thing I want to make sure everybody knows is that not every single class qualifies for this conversion grant. The way that we're funding this round of the conversion grant is through grants that we received from the state chancellor's office. And we applied for several grants to create 0 textbook cost degree pathways. So in order for a course to qualify for this, it either has to be specifically required for that degree, or it has to qualify as general education, either in a local degree or a transfer degree. So it really covers a lot of our courses, but there are some that are don't qualify for a degree or career and technical education certificate. So yeah, just know that. Okay, I'm going to pause there and see if y'all have any questions about that part before I start talking about LibreTexts. Yes, Greg.
Hi, thanks, Andy. A question I had when you mentioned earlier for automotive faculty, you were able to scan and then loan those books out to students. How do the copyright holders, how do they react to this whole OER movement in particular? Like, I mean, that one is good specifically about that one, but is there a, like I'm thinking also, say if I'm teaching a modern English class, modern English lit class, right? A lot of those books are still going to be under copyright. But if I want to make it OER, I mean, that of course will apply to lots of fields. That was, for example, popped in my mind. How does that work with copyright?
Okay, so this is a great question. Thank you for asking it. In many cases, literature is a great example. The library has the ability to purchase ebook licenses. So for many of those courses, I have a form that you can fill out and say, I'm using this for my class. It's required, and there's no, it's never going to be OER, and it's going to be 90 years before it's in the public domain. So in those cases, I do have some dedicated funding to purchase ebook licenses. For the textbook example, the practice that we're using is called controlled digital lending. It is controversial. It is, the publishers do not like it, and there have been lawsuits already. They're not in this part of the country, they're in another circuit court. So even though decisions have been made, it technically doesn't apply to us. And we did seek consultation from our legal counsel before we started this practice. And we're told that the benefits at this point outweigh the potential negatives. And so we've moved forward with it. But the idea behind it is that it is a very controlled environment. We only loan the number of copies that we actually own. So if we've purchased 50 copies of a book, we digitize it, and then we're only allowed to loan 50 copies of that book. So 30 of those might be digital and 20 might be physical. And it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Only one student at a time can be in a copy of the book. The digital copies are very locked down. They can't print, they can't download, they can't read it offline. They have to be online, excuse me. So it's not an ideal solution, but many academic textbook publishers have realized that that this is happening. And so with newer editions of the book, they are making it only available as a digital rental, which means we don't have access to it then. So that's how they're kind of trying to circle around that. Pearson is a good example of that. Almost all of their new editions are only available as a digital rental. If they have physical books, those are also usually only available as a rental, so they have to be returned.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that stuff? Okay. So now I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to talk about LibreTexts and some of the resources that are available through LibreText. And then I think we will probably have time at the end for those of you who are interested in applying or have applied for the conversion grant. We can kind of go through your first check-in and you can knock that off your list as well. So LibreText is a platform that hosts open educational resources. And initially it started out with just textbook material. And now in the last probably 5 years, it's opened up to open homework as well. And there are several platforms within. Delmar Larson is a chemistry faculty at UC Davis. He is the founder of LibreText, and he calls it the LibreVerse. And there are several things that are available through it. So the first thing I'm going to show you is LibreText, which is primarily the textbooks that are available. And at the very end of this presentation, there'll be, I'll share a link to the presentation, so you'll have access to this and access to all of these links. This page gives you kind of an overview, and then it has links to all of the individual libraries. So I'm going to use math as an example because here at CRC, our math faculty have been very active in this. And so I can show you examples of both bookshelves. When you get into a library, there is typically 3 different areas where you can go. Not all of them have learning objects. So this isn't in every library. The main bookshelf that you see are kind of, I want to say it's material that is published more widely. And OpenStax is a good example of that. So I hope you've heard of OpenStax. It is kind of one of the first iterations of this idea of creating open educational resources. Textbooks started with OpenStax, which is, I'm drawing a blank. I want to say it's Tufts University, but I might be wrong, but we can look at one. So this page has larger, widely used material. Yes, Rice University. Thank you, Greg. And then you can see on this main library, it breaks it down to more granular topics within mathematics. So I'm going to show you the calculus library. And here is the OpenStax textbook. So because it's an open educational resource, you can find it on the OpenStax platform, or you can find it in other platforms, and it's also inside LibreTexts. And then there's some other, sometimes they'll take a commercial author and they will map the textbook to mimic that commercially published textbook. So if you're really just dedicated to the Stewart Early Transcendental Calculus book, you can look at this textbook and see if this one might work for you as well. Once you click on a book, you have different chapters, and inside each chapter, you might have different sections. At the end of the book, you can access the table of contents up here or here. At the end of the book, each book will have back matter, including detailed licensing, which will show you what Creative Commons license has been assigned to each individual page. And I can see on lots of these pages, it's undeclared. So this is something that LibreTexts would have to go in and try to update that information. But there are different, you can remix with different types of licenses. I'm going to go back to this main page. In addition to that main bookshelf, you will see campus bookshelves. And I highly encourage folks who are interested in doing a remix to check out some of these campus bookshelves, because it's likely or possible that other colleges, other faculty have already done something that you might find useful. And I'm going to go ahead and go into our page because I know our faculty have done a lot of work in this area. And so you can see they have gone through and they have created textbooks for individual courses for specific classes at CRC. And in some cases, it's lecture notes like this one. In some cases, it's the actual textbook. And when you click on this textbook, again, you have different chapters. And when you go to the back matter and look at the detailed licensing, it will show you what the license of the original page was. And when you click on it, it will take you to the page that they grabbed this information from. And in some cases, in lots of cases in our particular math department, they're really particular in how things are outlined and the voice that's being used. So they have edited a lot of these pages from scratch. They've gone in and every single page will have an edit on it. And then I'm going to go back home. You might also find learning objects within the library. So in this particular case, there's some simulations, there's some interactive figures, there's some activities. So there are lots of different things within the library itself. So that's the LibreText. Their homework system is called Adapt. And so inside Adapt, there you can create questions natively within Adapt, or you can pull in from different formats. So WebWork is a format that's used for equations. So is IMath AS. So if you're familiar with My Open Math, that's this. And then H5P, if you've ever seen in some, often they're embedded in Pressbooks, you'll see interactive questions where you can like drag and drop material. That's H5P. You can import, and you can create. There's a separate platform in LibreText called LibreText Studio where you can create material as well. I would say the only kind of caveat with the H5P is there are lots of problems with accessibility related to 508 compliance. So if you have students who need assistive technology to complete their classwork, you will likely have to make an alternative for those students. But the way that Studio is outlined, if you're creating a question in Studio that is, the system knows this is not accessible, it will kind of give you that warning and let you know you need to create an alternative for students who won't be able to do this. And the drag and drop is a good example of that. Adapt, this page kind of describes it a little bit more about exactly what it is. Eventually, there will be a single login for most everything is a single login right now, but right now Adapt is a separate login, and they're working on integrating it, but right now it is a separate login. And there are, once you log in and you get an instructor account, these are my courses, these are things that I have imported. And then there are lots of public courses that are out there already. And you have the ability to pull in an entire course or to pull in just questions from a course. And Adapt is a whole other workshop, but we will have workshops this semester more on Adapt, and we have faculty who are actively going to be using Adapt in chemistry and in physics, and our math, the equations that they've created in My Open Math have already been pulled into Adapt as well. Conductor is the project management tool, and this is the page that gives you some information on it. I logged into it earlier, so I'm just going to show you what it looks like. On the Conductor page, you have projects that you're actively working on, and then you can also view other projects that are being done. So right now this is a textbook that I asked them to harvest because it's being used for this particular remix, which is being used in our nutrition department. So one of our nutrition faculty has created an outline, and we are working on getting all of the materials to actually create that textbook for her. And I'm going to talk about a little bit more about that in just a minute. But the project management tool allows us to create projects, add people to the project, and then you can send messages and kind of track the progress within the system. And then when you're ready to publish the textbook, you request it to be published, and then it gets pushed onto our campus bookshelf. And then the last thing is Commons, which is in the catalog that has all of this material in it. So this, I would say, would be the place to start if you're looking to do a remix. And you can do a keyword search for something very broad or something more granular. What I've found though is that the keyword search is primarily searching titles and headings. So it's not great at like searching the full text of a textbook. So if you're looking for like a specific theory, you're probably not going to find it on this search. You might have to search within the book itself. I'm going to do just a broad search. So once you've done your search, there are filters here. So it's telling me there are 14 books, there are 3 assets, there are 27 projects happening. And the books, it's defaulting to the books. I can see where they are. So Foothill College, so that I know that that is on a campus bookshelf. This is on a campus bookshelf. This, because it says LibreText, is on that main bookshelf, the one that I first showed you. But if you see and every once in a while, someone will create a book in a campus bookshelf, and LibreText will decide, you know what, this needs to be on the main bookshelf as well. So they might put it in both places. So these are the textbooks. And when you click on something, there are links here. So you can read it online. That's going to take you to the actual textbook in LibreTexts. And then there's some other tools. These same tools are what show up on the textbook here. So you can download, print, order a print copy, those kinds of things. Back here. Assets might be things like, here's a lab manual, Word documents. Sometimes you'll see PowerPoint slides. So there might be PowerPoint slides connected to a specific chapter. Those are really the 3 main things that I've seen: Word docs, PDFs, and PowerPoint slides. And then projects, you can see things that are actively happening. So in some cases, things are already completed, and in other cases, they're under construction. And so you can kind of see what is going on, what's happening. And again, these are all open educational resources. So if somebody's name is connected to it and you can see, oh my gosh, this looks like something I would want to use too, you can actually reach out to folks and say, hey, do you want to collaborate, or can I use it? You don't actually have to ask permission to use it because it has an open license. But these are kind of the 3 things as you're searching through Commons. All right, I'm going to pause there. Any questions? Yes, Greg. Oh, Greg, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you for that too. Thank you for mentioning my work earlier. So last semester, I had my students edit my textbook. They made contributions, and I'm using that edited textbook this semester. So I went through and I asked my students if they wanted to be named, and those that said yes, I added their names and all that. Now, as I was doing that, and I was looking at my new textbook that has changes that my students made that I supervised, I was like, wait a minute. And I included all the licensing, like this is a remix of, or the right wording for this other thing. I realized that I'm now an author too. And so I felt weird because I had to rewrite my parts of my course where I talk about examples of how to cite the text. Now they're citing me, and I don't have this experience before because I haven't written stuff, right, that for students. I've written for other folks. So is this a normal? I'm sure the feelings are always good, so I own my feelings and I love them. But is this a normal part of the process that, I'm now I'm the lead author in effect of this book because I was the most recent person, so I'm putting my name in front. And so this is all you're nodding, so I'm guessing this is just part of the deal.
It's part of the deal. Depending on what the original license was, all of the Creative Commons licenses have the by statement. So it's CC by is going to be in all of them. And that by stands for attribution. So you're always going to anything new that you're creating, you attach what license you want to add to that material, and it has to make you need to make sure that it complies with the original license from the material that you're using. And you put your information, but then you will usually put a statement that it was created from these materials, and then you list the other material that you use to create it.
And then, so right now, I have it's all Google Docs is what the format is, because again, that's how I'm having my students do the editing. So if I wanted to add that to our bookshelf in LibreTexts, then I'll ask you this specific question, but I'm guessing that, yes, there is a way to do that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad I'm enrolled in that course. I'll find out.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, I've got one more question if I can. So in addition to that, and this is something I've done before, is I've created my own, multiple choice quiz questions. Did you read? Did you read? Right? Because the textbook that I'm using does have some of those, but there were some cases where I added, and I also created some for some lectures that I'm using. Is there a way to share those ancillary materials as well? And within the OER community, do the folks who like Delmar, like the folks who run these systems, do they care, and B, do they try to prohibit students from accessing these things? And how does that, because I remember with publisher textbook, right, there was the ancillary materials were only available to instructors, and they had some way of verifying that I was an instructor. So yeah.
Yes, there is kind of a checks and balances process when you're creating the Adapt account, and you're only allowed to create an instructor account after they've verified that you are an instructor. And if you are adding material, it's some assessment, you are deciding whether it is a formative assessment where the answers are easily discoverable, or whether it's a summative assessment and you are only letting other faculty who are pulling that material see the answer.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So what I would recommend is that y'all create a Libre One account, and that gives you access to Conductor and LibreTexts. And if we're creating a project, we can add you to that project. Like I said, I'm going to share these slides with you. And there is, I am working on, I have not completed it, but Sarah Davis and I went through the Creative Commons certificate program last semester, and our final project, we created a Adapt 101 course that is not completely finished, but it is published right now. And one of the pages that's linked in the slideshow is the page on how do you create a Libre One account, and then how to create, if you want to take it a step further and create a Adapt account. Remixing. I think I've pretty much already defined it before, but Greg is a great example where he started out with the OpenStax textbook, and then he has maybe moved things around, deleted things that he didn't think were relevant, had his students actively work and contribute, and he wants to add those into certain chapters. And that can all be done. This is officially category 2 in the OER Conversion Grant. And the great thing about this is that I also have some OER specialists, some temporary classified professionals who are helping with this project. So you certainly can learn how to use the remixer inside LibreText, but if you have no interest in doing that, we have folks that can help you with that process. And so for this category, you would complete an outline that you're telling us exactly what is the new organization of the textbook that you are creating. And this is a blank outline. Up here at the top, there is a link that shows you a completed outline, so you can kind of see what it is that I'm asking for. So in this particular case, she was embedding this textbook into Canvas, so she wanted to call her chapters modules. And this is the overall chapter name or module name. And then she has section titles, where the original source came from, the original source title, and then she gives me a link to the section that she wants. And in some cases, like in your case, Greg, if you have Google Docs, you would say, this isn't coming from LibreText. This is on this particular Google Doc, and you would give us a link to that Google Doc, okay? So you fill out this whole outline, and there are video instructions as well on how to do this. And that's where it kind of comes back to this, let me find the page, the Commons page. This is going to help you find all of the material that you might be using to create your textbook, to know exactly where it's coming from. Then we will create the project in Conductor, and we will build that textbook for you. Then once that part is done, we'll let you know, okay, here it is. Now you have access to it. You are an editor on it. The editing interface within LibreText is the same text editor that is in Canvas, so it should look very similar. So if you want to make additional changes, and then there's lots of other things that you can do. You can embed, you can create questions and adapt and embed, like check your knowledge questions at the end of a chapter. There's lots of things that you can do with your textbook, but the actual building of it, that sometimes paralyzes people and they think, oh, I don't even want to tackle this. We will build it for you, and then you can take it and go from there. All right, questions? Okay.
Yeah, I have another question about the grants and the funding. So I know that I did the grant last year before, for my classes, and I'm not sure. And this is. I think I would want to hear the answer to this question, although I'm sure it depends. I want to know basically how often can we apply for, as an individual, how many times can I get funded? Because each semester I do make changes. Now this what I'm doing right now, like this is my first time reusing a textbook that my students have edited, spring 25.
Yeah.
I don't expect, assuming that the opportunity is still there. I'm not going to say, you know what, I'm going to do the same thing in the fall because my spring students are going to make changes and I'm going to have to do the work on it. So that feels a bit unethical to me. But I will actually, I'll ask this question. I think I would want to know the answer to is, can we do work on courses that we're not teaching?
In most cases, if it's a course that you have taught in the past and you think you will teach in the future,
right.
Yes.
Okay.
If it is in cases where you've never taught it in the past, but you will teach it in the future, that's on a case-by-case basis. We've been approving those. And I can give you one example where like there were changes that are happening kind of related to Common Course numbering and some of the changes in the learning outcomes. So they're actively doing a curriculum review, and an adjunct faculty member expressed an interest, even though he had never taught this particular class before. He was really on board to try to help with the curriculum changes, and he wanted to build this textbook. And the department chair said, yes, go for it. And so we went ahead and approved that. In some cases, it'll be a case-by-case basis, and then in other cases, it'll just be an easy yes. But for that question of if I'm making some minor changes or I'm adding, you wouldn't qualify to apply for that same class in a subsequent year. But if you said, like this semester we're working on the textbook and I want to publish that, knowing that there will be other changes, and then next semester I want to apply for that same course, but we're going to work on assessments with my students, and then I'm going to publish that, you can do that.
Okay.
So
great. Thank you.
If you apply right now, or you have applied, when you look at the due dates of everything, it has a due date of the last Friday in May, the last Friday after finals ends. So I think finals is on a Thursday, and then the due date for this assignment, I think, is 10 a.m. on Friday. That's like the hard. Of course, if you turn it in earlier, that's great. But that's not an absolute, because we're doing this, we're doing it next year as well. That was kind of to help us get an idea of how many people were interested and how much money we needed to make sure that all of these folks got paid. If you know you can't get it done and you really want to work over it over the summer, we'll just push it into next fiscal year, and then you would get paid next fiscal year. So the due date is very squishy and it's movable. If I have a handful of folks who've finished already, and they're already in the process of getting paid. So you can do the work now, or you can kind of push it off. The hard due date will be next May, because we have to have things in place. The grant is asking us to have things in place by fall of 2026. And because our fiscal year ends on June 30th, in order to get you paid, that work has to be done in May so that we can do all of the paperwork and push it through.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I want to make sure everybody had a chance to fill this out. I had another question, but for some reason it looks like I accidentally deleted it. I was going to ask, so you all can give me some feedback. Are there workshops that you would like the AERC committee to try to host this semester or in the fall on things to learn how to do, what to do? I know ADAPT is a big one, and I'm working with Del Mar to get some specialized training just for ADAPT. Is there anything else? All right, you can always let me know. Ideas for reusable assignments across disciplines. Always a good idea. I am going to show you this last slide in case you want to scan that QR code. Here is the actual presentation. Oops. I'll put it in chat too, in case you're on the laptop. Okay. I am going to stop the recording unless there's any other questions related to this.